Hi everyone. There is quite a bit of news to cover in this video, so let's get right to it. I mentioned some time ago that world leaders were preparing for something catastrophic when it was discovered that they were preparing top secret bunkers for the political and wealthy elite. The disaster that governments are and have been preparing for is one that will have dire consequences for civilization. So let's examine the facts that are known at this time and see if we can connect the dots. Let's begin with a video clip from 2015, which may explain why trillions of taxpayers' money has mysteriously disappeared. This shelter, located in Europe, is just one of many shelters that have been built for the world's elite. So if you're afraid of the end of the world and have a few millions of dollars to spend, you're welcome to secure a place at the Europa One shelter. If not, at least now you know such a place exists. Something strange is happening right here in the United States. There appears to be room for 10,000 of the world's elite to step into an underground world beneath Denver. Huge drills have dug underground bases below the Rocky Mountains, which are connected to Washington by high-speed trains. Giant nuclear-powered drills, similar to those used by the British and French to carve out the English Channel, are now glazing the walls of underground facilities, fortifying them for future use. The reason for such a complex system of bunkers has nothing to do with a nuclear World War III, but rather a natural disaster the likes of which this present world has never witnessed. This event is apocalyptic and involves the arrival of Planet X. The magnetic field created by the passage of this planetary system could cause a massive debris field to rain down on the world. Something epic is about to occur that the elite have been preparing for since the discovery of this system back in the early 1980s by the IRIS telescope. First, its discovery was announced to the world via 2 major newspapers, and then it was suddenly suppressed and no government agency was allowed to discuss it again. So what can most people do to prepare who aren't among the privileged few? Will they wait until the government makes a nationwide announcement and then look up into the sky to see what's coming? Will they wait until a series of nuclear weapons are detonated or a viral pandemic becomes widespread before finally becoming motivated to prepare? But by that time, it will have been too late to make any preparations. There have been unusual reports of strange sounds and vibrations coming from underground in the past 20 years. Almost continuously, reports have come from ordinary people in many townships across the heartland of the United States and in southern Canada. Listen as residents of Windsor, Ontario, talk about these unusual sounds that are ongoing.
That we began hearing and feeling a very loud vibration outside. We really didn't acknowledge it at the time, but 1.5 years later, the vibrations and the rumblings have become so intense that it's disrupted our daily lives. The rumblings began almost immediately in the morning and proceed throughout the evening, getting stronger in intensity.
I live in South Windsor. We started hearing some of the rumbling noises in about February. And then in time, I started noticing greater frequency and patterns, particularly in the evenings, where this noise was occurring. And it really culminated in an incident at the end of May 31st. I was watching a basketball game, and it was incredibly loud. The vibrations, you could feel them coming through the house and through the windows. We went out to see what it was, and it was just so intense. And as a result of that, I got involved. I contacted the Ministry of the Environment to find out what the issue was and to find out what they knew about it, and made some further efforts to get the federal government to provide some monitoring equipment.
Back in March, I started to receive 1 or 2 phone calls about some consistent rumblings and vibrations in neighborhoods in and around the ward. Specifically around Rankin and Taunton and other areas like that. At the time, I probably would have thought it was just some sort of isolated construction project in the area, but it then escalated quite significant over the next 1.5 months, 2 months or so. I started hearing it from all over the western part of my ward, Ward 10, and then started to hear a lot more from residents all over the southern part of Windsor and west parts of Windsor and LaSalle. So I then, at this point, decided to get together with some residents, visit their homes, and start pinpointing on a map exactly where these vibration rumblings noises are coming from. Last night, around between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., I visited those homes, visited some areas, and it was a real strong vibration that had come from the ground. It was a synthetic noise. It's really there.
You personally experienced it?
I personally experienced it. I sat and the person in the house at the time shut off the air conditioner, shut off the furnace, shut off the water main, shut off the electricity, and turned everything off and around the house. And if you put your palm to the hardwood floor, you could feel some sort of synthesizing little bit of a noise vibration. It's very weak. It grows a little bit, but it's consistent, and it goes back down. It's real. It's there. It's present, and I think that this issue needs to be taken much more serious. There needs to be an investigation. It's out there. It's getting complaints are rising, and it started with 1 or 2 people, and now it's gotten to hundreds and hundreds of people across the southern west part of the city, and even bordering into the south.
So as you can see, there are difficult questions that we must ask ourselves. Did you know that there is a joint venture of the National Security Agency, the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Center for Disease Control, which has been created to facilitate an expansive tunnel system throughout the South to protect us from nuclear, biological, and chemical attack. These tunnels will also serve as conduits for national defense to move troops, supplies, and armor between strategic locations. Here is something that is worth noting. The tunnels are already in place. They are reportedly using a 6-month time frame to clear out the facilities and reconfigure them for supply depots, communication hubs, and pre-processing centers. Now, you know there are going to be some who are going to think this is all crazy nonsense. These are the same people who spend little or no time researching this. The same is true with respect to Planet X. It's easy to say it doesn't exist if you haven't done any serious research. My suggestion to those who know or feel that something just isn't right is to use the internet while it is still available for your use. There are many books and publications that can teach you how to construct fortified bunkers and at the same time show you how to prepare food and water supplies in a natural manner. Some of you will say, what is the use of preparing? We're all going to die anyway. That is an easy out for those who are not prepared and have no intention of doing so. But for the rest of us, being prepared to face any potential disaster is of the utmost importance, as it could happen at any given time. Every disaster, regardless of the impact, teaches us a lesson, that it is better to have a clear understanding of what to do when disaster strikes than to be wandering in the wilderness with no concept of how to survive. The construction of underground facilities may very well be related to what is happening in the sky. Many of you are convinced that another sun is appearing. There are many photos and videos that are providing ample evidence to support this. Regardless, there are some in the community who do not want to talk about this and are doing everything which is humanly possible to keep you from discovering the truth. One of the ways in which they have tried to hide this is through the continuous use of chemtrails. If you spend any time in the outdoors, especially in areas that are heavily populated, you will see the trails zigzag across the horizon prior to sunset or just before sunrise. The spraying of our atmosphere will continue as long as the vast majority of us have our faces glued to our cell phones or a television screen, or for as long as the mainstream media keeps it under wraps. It doesn't matter what we call this thing, a second sun, a brown dwarf star, Nibiru, the red or blue 𝗏𝗃 of Hopi prophecy. It just doesn't matter because it is there. They are attempting to keep it hiding from view. I know this because I have seen it firsthand. They spray chemtrails early in the morning and again in the evening. Not every day, but when it is needed. They even make an X to mark the spot. Whatever has entered into our existence, its presence is being felt across the solar system. What it will do and when it will make its presence known is a matter of interpretation. But it must be something extraordinary, otherwise the people in authority wouldn't be going to such extremes to keep its presence hidden for so many years. So, my friends, keep your eyes open and focused on your surroundings. Here is something very interesting that I just recently discovered about Nibiru, which is known in ancient literature as the planet of the crossing. It is now apparent that Nibiru is no longer a theory. Scientists and educators across the globe have come to the conclusion that its existence is real, and that it poses concerns for the inhabitants of planet Earth. This may seem whimsical to some of you, especially those who cannot grasp the concept of a Planet X. But for a number of years now, there have been a series of subtle hints given to the public, warning them of what is to come. This has been accomplished through means of Hollywood productions, commercials, and television documentaries. Now it seems even cartoons are providing an outlet for informing people. Most of you may be familiar with the cartoon series called Scooby-Doo. It's been in syndication for a long time. Well, as you will see in this video clip, the producers of this animated show have something to tell the world. Take a look.
Something's been bugging me about our little underwater escapade. There's a lot about that adventure I wish we could forget.
Amen to that.
But the weirdest part of all was what the late Abigail Gluck whispered.
Like I'll say, a crazy mummified corpse whispering Nibiru is creepy times 10.
It gets creepier. I googled it and found a lot. Namely this. Nibiru is a planet listed in the writings of 𝗪𝗱𝗂, particularly his book The 12th Planet. According to Sitchin's interpretation of Babylonian religious texts, a giant planet called Nibiru passes by Earth every 3,600 years and allows its sentient inhabitants to interact with humanity. These beings, which Sitchin identified with the Anunnaki of Sumerian myth, would become humanity's first gods. My favorite internet encyclopedia says there's supposed to be a collision. The Nibiru collision is a disastrous encounter between the Earth and a large planetary object. Believers in this doomsday event usually refer to this object as Planet X, or Nibiru.
The doomsday event?
Regardless of the intent of the producers, there is certainly a story to convey here. Although this is a cartoon watched by millions of children around the world, there appears to be a serious overtone incorporated into the animated episode. Down in Antarctica, there is another story waiting to be told. All of a sudden, government officials, military brass, even predominant members of the world's religions are going there. But why? What is so important that requires their immediate attention and concern? There's even some speculation that people are being evacuated. If this should prove to be true, then something very disconcerting is taking place on the frozen continent. But there is one thing that is a certainty that has significant implications. The crack in the 𝗨𝗱𝗲 ice shelf continues to grow and expand. There are now only 10 miles of ice that separate this from the open sea. This is not the first time that Antarctica has been on the verge of losing a significant portion of its ice sheet. But the 𝗨𝗱𝗲 ice collapse will most likely change the landscape of the continent. It will allow the glacial ice to enter the ocean faster and accelerate the pace of sea level rise. This is because 𝗨𝗨𝗲 is 10 times bigger than its nearby ice shelf, and therefore will have a more devastating impact on Earth's ecological balance. As you know, Skywatch Media has been posting a series of images and video clips captured by skywatchers from all over the world. They are posted on our Facebook page, which was created primarily for this purpose. Keeping you up to date is very important, so what I would like to do in my upcoming presentations is to include a few images and videos that were posted on our Facebook page that you may not have had an opportunity to view yet. So let's take a look at what is happening at this time. The photo captures from Kent, England are absolutely amazing in that the individual who was photographing the sun over Magatte Beach had no idea what he had captured. And he sent these images to a friend who is an astronomical observer for his analysis, and they were then published to our Facebook page for review. There is something that is important to emphasize with these captures that disputes anything that a debunker may throw at you regarding their authenticity. And that has to do with the criteria for labeling an object as a lens flare. And this is what you need to know. Lens flares do not reflect as an object in a water landscape. As you can see in this image, the second sun, Nemesis, whatever this may be, is clearly reflecting in the water. A lens flare cannot do that because it does not exist. It is an illusion of the camera lens. Furthermore, this was photographed in the outdoors, so there were no obstructions that could cause a double reflection of the sun. Now, if we go to the FAA webcam capture from Alaska of the red planet, or the red dwarf star as it may actually be, not only is this object rotating, suggesting that it is in fact in orbit around our sun, but incredibly the object is captured behind the cloud formations and is even visible behind an aerospray trail. Now, have you ever heard of a lens flare that can do that? I haven't. It just isn't physically